What happened to Star Trek? Picard actors cut from Season 3 and their characters. Star Trek, Picard's third season felt, to many fans, like a love letter, a gleeful reunion of the Next Generation crew, cruisers and all. But that letter had margins, names that were quietly left off the invitation. Several actors who were central to Picard's first 2 seasons didn't make the leap into Season 3, and their characters received abbreviated or off-screen fates. Here's a creative, compassionate look at what happened to the actors, the characters, and the storytelling choices behind those disappearances. The short version, opportunity versus trade-offs. When showrunner Terry Matalas steered Season 3 toward a full-throttle next-generation reunion, that choice carried real costs. Making room logistically and financially for veteran TNG actors meant trimming the roster that Picard had spent 2 seasons building around Patrick Stewart's later life odyssey. As Matalas candidly described it, the decision felt terrible. He had to sacrifice characters he'd come to love in order to center the TNG legacy arc. In plain terms, budgets, schedules, and the narrative aim of a grand reunion collided, and some of Picard's newer crew were the uneasy collateral. Below, I'll walk through the main names most often mentioned as cut, what the sources report, and in a little creative aside, where their characters might have drifted in the galaxy. Who was left out and why it mattered. Multiple outlets list the same group of principal Picard season half-cast members who didn't return as regulars in Season 3. Isa Briones Soji/Soji's kin, Santiago Cabrera Cristobal Rios, Evan Evagora Elner, and Alison Pill Agnes Girardi. Michelle Hurd's Raffi Musiker is a notable exception who did return. The reason wasn't they weren't liked, it was a production decision to make room for the TNG cast, and the showrunner has admitted it was an agonizing choice. Isa Briones, Soji, and multiple selves. Soji, the android with a human face, was one of Picard's emotional centers in Season 1. Isa Briones' performance anchored the show's meditation on identity and personhood. Cutting Soji from Season 3 meant that several unresolved threads, her search for meaning, the synth question, the fate of her family, were largely left off-screen or implied. In story, the show leaned into the idea that synths and androids were dispersing into new lives after the upheavals of Seasons 1 to 2. Creatively, you can imagine Soji taking a long, quiet voyage, learning to live beyond the lab, perhaps teaching or founding a sanctuary for synth rights. Off-screen, Briones moved on to other projects and the unavoidable frustration actors feel when a character's arc is put on hold for larger franchise logistics. Santiago Cabrera Cristobal Rios, the roguish, ship-savvy pilot whose ship and moral compass softened across the series, served as Picard's transport and comic relief, and as an emotional anchor to Picard's strange new family. Season 3's reunion needed screen time to thread the TNG ensemble together, so Rios' tale was reduced to mention and implication rather than a dedicated arc. In universe, a plausible fate for Rios is captaincy of a small freighter, charting routes that keep him away from galactic politics, a retired rogue who sends the occasional smuggler's postcard. Santiago Cabrera, meanwhile, publicly acknowledged the change as part of the show's creative pivot. Evan Evagora Elner was pure heart and lethal skill, a Romulan-raised warrior monk whose loyalty to Picard felt mythic. Fans were especially vocal about Elner because his story had such potential, and because his fate, particularly following the events of Season 2, was left in a kind of narrative limbo when Season 3 pivoted. The show technically didn't erase Elner, rather it deprioritized his path in favor of packing Season 3 with legacy cameos and set pieces. In a softer imagining, Elner might have retired to teach swordcraft at a monastery, or joined a quiet reconciliation corps helping Romulan refugees, noble, visible, and off-camera. The actor, like his colleagues, pressed forward with new work while fans debated what might have been. Alison Pill, Dr. Agnes Girardi. Girardi's arc, from scientist to morally complicated accomplice to a character wrestling with conscience and agency, was one of the series' most interesting transformations. Her absence from Season 3's main beats left viewers asking whether her redemption, or at least reckoning, would get closure. The show hinted that some characters had chosen quieter lives or institutional exile. Girardi's trajectory can be credibly imagined as a long-term project, penitent, politically entangled, perhaps working to undo harm in under-resourced sectors of the galaxy. Alison Pill's own career didn't stall. The structural choice belonged to the showrunners and the scale of their reunion ambitions. The production realities, budgets, actors' schedules, and fan expectations, bringing nearly the entire next-generation core aboard required money, coordination, and screen-time logistics. As Michael Dorn-Wirth and other veterans implied, the packages offered to legacy actors were persuasive. When a show opts to pay for a massive legacy ensemble, something else has to shrink, either the runtime of episodes, the number of locations, or the roster of newer regulars. Matala's decision reads like a classical TV trade-off: center the emotional payoff for a large section of the fanbase, the TNG reunion, and risk alienating viewers who'd come to love the new characters. It was a wager that the franchise-level catharsis would outweigh individual losses. How the show tried and sometimes failed to give closure. To its credit, Picard didn't always leave names stranded with no acknowledgement. Raffi's return, cameos, and dialogue threads tried to nod to the wider cast and hint at off-screen lives. But those nods are not the same as dedicated arcs. The series relied on implication. They're doing well, a line might say, or a news montage might imply a world still turning. For fans invested in Rios or Soji, that's thin comfort. For TV executives and legacy fever viewers, those same moves are pragmatic storytelling. You can't give everyone a satisfying 3-episode mini-arc when the finale needs an ensemble. What this meant for the actors, and for fans: from the actor's point of view, being cut is a mixed bag. Disappointment that a performance's next chapter is deferred, and practical realities, schedules, new auditions, other work. From the fandom's viewpoint, it sparked conversations about franchise priorities. Should legacy nostalgia trump original storytelling? Some fans felt the reunion was cathartic and worth the cost. Others felt the show's original investment in new characters deserved follow-through. Both arguments are valid. The tension is a reminder that serialized storytelling is also a balancing act between art and a production's economic realities. A hopeful, human coda. If we step back from contracts and budgets and into the imaginative space Star Trek invites, every character cut from the Season 3 stage still exists somewhere in the canon's wide, luminous map and in the fans' minds. Soji could be teaching synth rights as law. Rios could be sipping brandy in a port city he refuses to name. Elnor could be carving lessons into wooden dummies at a Romulan monastery. Jurati could be rebuilding what she once helped break. Those endings might be fanfiction, sure, but they're also valid continuations of the emotional truths the show built. And outside the world of storytelling, the actors Isa Briones, Santiago Cabrera, Evan Evagora, Alison Pill continued their careers, bringing the parts of themselves they honed on Picard into new work. The pragmatic truth of TV is that characters ebb and flow. The humane truth is that the people,